well, what happened was like we sold Twitch. I got everything I wanted and more that I ever thought I wanted, right? And then I found myself a month after we sold it thinking like, I'm just as unhappy as ever.
Welcome to Divot, a community for people trying to make their mark on the world, where each week I'm interviewing the best creatives in business, tech, sports, and entertainment to learn how they've made their mark. Go to divot.org to see all the episodes, suggest a speaker I should interview, or a product we should look at. You can watch all the episodes on X, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.
Divot.
This episode is brought to you by Google Cloud and Notion.
Today, we're in a warehouse just north of San Francisco in Santa Rosa, California. I'm interviewing Justin Kan, the co-founder of live streaming platform Twitch, which sold to Amazon for $1 billion. He's also the co-founder of Goat Capital, a venture firm backing entrepreneurs, and he was part of the initial Y Combinator batch that included founders from Reddit and OpenAI. Justin's entrepreneurial spirit has propelled him through tons of startups and projects. He's known for his candid insights, talking about the highs and lows of business and life. And today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about: finding fulfillment from life, from work, and personal development. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for having me. This place is crazy.
All right, thanks for coming.
What
are we sitting in front of?
Tell us about the mothership, yeah.
Oh yeah, this is our latest piece of Burning Man art from our camp, Titanic's End. We built an alien spaceship. I think you're probably just seeing the lower part of it, but it's an ellipsoid spaceship, and the lore behind it is it's the alien ship that came down and created Titanic's End, which is a 70-foot long synthwave iceberg with over 200,000 LEDs on it. It has lasers that go 17 miles. It's got a 200,000 watt sound system on it. And so it's, it's pretty big and pretty cool. At least I think so.
That's
and
amazing.
Yeah, every year we bring it out to Burning Man and other events around the world. And it's a labor of love.
How do you get this thing out of this room? I mean, I've seen pictures of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't do it justice.
It looks big in here, and it doesn't fit through the doors. It's 25 feet tall.
Yeah.
So we had to pick it up, which comes in two pieces, like the two halves of the ellipsoid, broken right down the middle.
Yeah.
And it's very clever. Like our guy on our team, Brian, who's the engineer, designed it in a really amazing way where you can lift it up with forklifts and then just place it. The top half just goes down on the bottom half and fits into these cones.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of like, it works.
Does it work? I mean, you get it out into the desert, and is it just, do you have like backups on if something happens, or is it just like?
Well, we had, when you're at Burning Man, there's a lot of things that can happen. Some of them are tough for like vehicles and construction and stuff. So like the build, when we were building it, it was really windy, and then we had to wait until it's like the wind died down, and there's like a dust storm that blew through. I should send you a picture of this for the, maybe put it over it. But it's like, there's a lot of chaos. And then the heat of the desert was like overheating the battery actually. So we were like, that was a problem. It's fully electric vehicle.
Yeah.
So
when you get it off the trailer, like how far does it have to go to like, can you just like drop it, or are you taking it?
Well, we just drive it around. Yeah, we drive it around all
How
over
fast?
At like 2 miles an hour, Not fast.
Yeah.
Not fast.
So you just ride it out in the desert.
Yeah, we just ride around. And it's also the front of house for Titanic's End, so it serves as the place where we control the lights and lasers. So when we do a party at night with TE, we just roll it up, and then this is like the booth.
And it's got like multiple, once you go inside. Originally, I thought, oh, maybe we're going to go inside of it. And you totally could. I was like, I thought, oh, it's small, but actually it's like multiple layers. And
yeah,
I mean, how many people are in here when it's
maybe like 30 people.
Inside?
Yeah, there's probably like 20 or 30 people. There's usually like 6 people operating the Titanic's End lights and lasers. And then we have guests, people are hanging out in there.
I think you're kind of seen as like this, with starting Twitch and a bunch of other software companies, you're seen as, from the outside, of kind of a software person. But if I think, it's like if I've looked more into the things you've done, or like you started with Justin TV, which was actually like basically hardware, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like you're like
It's almost like a performance art also plus hardware. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I stream my life to the internet 24/7 for 6
You're like
months.
strapped on, right? Like in a
Yeah.
backpack and, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
it
that's
like
right. We basically built this hardware camera. My co-founder Kyle kind of designed it, and it was I wore this camera that was streaming what I saw. It was like my point of view and audio to the internet.
Yeah.
And that turned into this idea for let's create a platform for live video, because it turns out my show wasn't that interesting. You know, I was kind of the software guy, a little bit of a nerd, like in front of my computer most of the time. And people would log on and they'd say like,
it was like always on, right?
it was always on. So
Yeah.
we'd be working on our website and it'd be like me in front of the computer, right? And people would be like, hey, go out and entertain us, go do something.
Yeah.
But luckily they also gave us the feedback, hey, how are you doing this? How are you, this is 2007, like streaming to the internet. There was no Instagram
You were the
Live.
original Kai Cenat.
Yeah, there was, yeah, exactly. So, people wanted to do it. They would said, I want to broadcast my own talk show. I want to broadcast my own, I'm doing a bike race, whatever it was. And so the light bulb went off and we said, hey, we should make a platform for anyone to broadcast anything they want. And that's what became Justin TV, which eventually became Twitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I read about you guys, like the police, chasing you at times, or like,
well, the people would SWAT us like all the time. They would like call the cops on us and report crimes in our apartment, which was
just to see what would happen.
Just to see what would happen. I can laugh about. I mean, it's not cool.
Sorry,
but I could. No. I mean, it's funny in retrospect for me, but like, it's a crime.
Yeah.
So don't do. I'm just saying, don't do it if you're watching from home. But like there were a lot of reasons why streaming my own life 24/7 wasn't good. But the primary reason was it just wasn't interesting. 24/7. I didn't have the mindset of somebody who was like, it was a 24/7 entertainer, or even like 6 hours of continuous entertainment. So the good part was, we were engineers, we were builders. So we ended up building it as a platform for other people.
Yeah. I read somewhere that you said that if your first startup had failed, you probably wouldn't have become an entrepreneur, or what do you?
Yeah. Well, who knows what would have happened in the fullness of time, but like we had this company that was kind of like Google Calendar.
Yeah. This is before.
This is before. This is in 2005.
Yeah.
Right when I graduated from college, we were starting this company. We saw Gmail come out. We were like, someone should make the calendar version of Gmail.
Right.
Turns out Google was going to be the one to make it, but we decided like, let's make something like that. We ended up getting funded in the first batch of Y Combinator, which is an accelerator that's funded all sorts of companies. You're familiar, but for the audience, like this is the company that's funded Reddit and Instacart, Coinbase, Dropbox, Airbnb. You were
in the first batch of the startups they funded.
They before they knew what they were doing, they just were funding a bunch of. They decided to do like fund their companies in batches, and they decided to admit us, my co-founder Emmett and I. So then that's how we got our start with startups. We ended up starting this company. Didn't really get traction. Over the year that we were starting it, Google Calendar actually came out that destroyed what small traction we had, and then we ended up selling it on eBay as like kind of a last-ditch effort. YOLO to try to recoup our investors' money. And we made like a small amount of money. We sold it for $258,000. And that was basically after we paid our investors back and gave them their share. It's kind of like Emmett and I had worked a year's job.
You got a salary.
We got a salary for a year, but we got in a lump sum at the end of the year. But
probably felt like a lot.
Yeah, it felt like a lot because I got like, I think
plus if you think if it's like going to be worth zero and you sell it for $250,000, you're like, that is a lot, right?
Yeah, I think we made 70 grand, and I thought like, hey, that's pretty cool,
Yeah.
And so we ended up, deciding to start things not so bad, and that's when we started Justin TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you the only person that's ever sold a business on eBay? Is that?
I was inspired. To be fair, I was inspired by another company that had sold their business the previous year on eBay for like 100 grand. A tech company. I was like, 100 grand. That I want. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as like?
I think of myself as an entrepreneur first. To me, I think what's different. Like for the longest time, I thought of myself as like just another guy. Like I'm just the same as I feel myself like I'm an everyman. And then over time, as it became more successful, maybe like people started to be like, dude, that's not true,
Yeah.
And I've come to realize, I think the thing that is different, I'm kind of smart, I'm pretty hardworking, but like the thing that's really different about me is like, I have like a skewed sense of risk. like I think from other people, like I'm willing to take a lot of risk. Like, you know, I had a pretty solid job lined up out of school. I like gave back with a bonus check to start a company and with no experience.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, you know, the no experience really showed up in the performance of that company in many different ways. But then also, you know, so I have a skewed sense of risk. The other thing is like, I don't really second guess myself or see barriers to me doing things in the world. You know, when I'm like, hey, we should build this giant art car, it's not like I don't know the first thing about that. It's like, hey, like, let me just find some people who do know something and let's get everyone together to like build something cool. When it comes to building a company, you know, I might not know anything about that space, but I'm like, I probably figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, for example, I quit drinking 6 years ago.
Why did you do that?
Well, I was a functional alcoholic through most of my life and career, and it finally was, you know, obviously not working for me. Happy to dive into that. And like, but it, you know, kind of after enough time, I did my 10,000 hours of drinking. You know, I was like, I like to say I probably, you know, I try to calculate how many drinks I've drank in my life, and I think it's probably somewhere between 10 and 15,000.
Wow.
And I was like, I know it doesn't work for me. You know, I kind of did it every kind of way. So finally, I was just like, I got to quit drinking. Yeah. And so, I got drinking 6 years ago, and when I quit, there wasn't really anything good to drink if you're not a drinker, like if you're going out. And so, a couple of years ago, I was like, there should be a non-alcoholic wine, like a sparkling wine, like a champagne. I love champagne.
Yeah.
Or I did. And so I just was like, I want to create a non-alcoholic champagne company, and I don't know anything about beverage, creating like the liquid, you know, how to do CPG product.
Yeah.
But I was just talking about this idea I had and like what I thought the hole in the market was. And at a barbecue, actually, I met a friend of a friend who was a winemaker. And
so you were just kind of thinking about it. It was in the back of your head.
Yeah.
You hadn't actually done anything.
I hadn't done anything. I had an idea of what it could be. And then
you kind of intersected with this person.
Yeah. And I intersected with my now co-founder Woody, and we started a company that was like a non-alcoholic wine company, and it's a real product now. We actually have multiple products.
What is it? I should be drinking this. What is it called?
Yeah, well, we have our flagship product is called Woody's, which is a California wine, and it's distributed in
non-alcoholic.
Yeah, non-alcoholic. It's distributed in a bunch of different
really
states.
Cool.
You can buy it in. Let's see, where did we just go live with? In SF in the Bay Area, you can buy it in Buy Right.
Yeah.
Among a bunch of other shops.
It's really cool.
We also have a French import brand called La Petite Victoire, the Small Victory, and that's also in a bunch of places. So it's live and off to the races now.
So now you're a non-alcoholic wine
maker.
Expert.
Yeah, I don't know about expert. You know, I always think of myself. I have the beginner's mindset. I never think of myself as an expert in anything, actually.
Really?
Yeah, maybe in startups, like early stage startups particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do. I mean, you are an expert in that.
Yeah.
That thing you do, but nothing else.
Nothing else. No.
Huh. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I'd see you as an expert in a lot of things, but it's just like, is that just like, why is it?
I think it's like it was an adaptive, or like it was actually a trauma response personality trait. Maybe trauma response is the wrong word, but like when I was a kid, I felt like an outsider.
Yeah.
And so I was always, you know, I was kind of like, I went to school with not that many Asians. You know, I grew up here. My dad's from here, but like, I felt like I was kind of an outsider. I was kind of a nerd, you know, like Dungeons and Dragons and Magic cards and stuff like that. So I always felt like an outsider. I wasn't, you know, looking at the cool kids from the outside. And so that made me, I think I've always had that self-conception as an outsider. And so even when I'm like in an industry, like I was saying, maybe 10 years ago, I was telling like some friends of mine, like, I really feel like an outsider in Silicon Valley. They're like, dude, you're like work at Y Combinator, you sold Twitch. Like, what are you talking about? You know, like all these people who are like the successful people of Silicon Valley. And I was like, oh, I guess that's true. That's like not really true anymore. But like, that's how I see myself, you know? And then I think it helps me with that, keeping that beginner's mind, which I think is, you know, I think is a healthy way to live, is to think, like, if you think you don't know anything, you're more open to asking questions and being wrong about your assumptions and learning from the world around you.
Yeah.
When you think you know everything, then you're not learning anymore.
I could just see you like walking into a room or talking to this person that, you know, knew something about making wine and being like, just asking him 100 questions,
Yeah.
whether they're good or bad questions, like it doesn't matter, like you don't care. You're just like, I just want to learn. And that then leading to all sorts of new things that
Yeah,
change your mindset.
I think that's right. I'm always curious about the intersection of business and technology and marketing and economics and psychology. And that's kind of morphed into this career in entrepreneurship where, when you're building a new product, you're thinking about all of those things and like, how is it going to intersect with the world? And sometimes you're right. You have form a hypothesis. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think about taking risk and doing new things?
I think I'm just willing to work on something that that's like completely new and may not materialize into a market or a durable product or anything,
Yeah.
So like just projects, different projects, like the this non-alcoholic wine space. Non-alcoholic drinks is actually exploding globally because people are drinking a lot less.
Yeah.
But when I kind of started, I was like, that wasn't necessarily happening.
Yeah.
And when we started working on the product anyways. And so we were like, it was more of just like, hey, I want to just follow my curiosity and see what happens. And I'm willing to like put money into this thing and like just, like YOLO $1 million on like, let's see if there's a market here. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, but you've had so much success. Like I think some people would say like everything you need, like, well, if it's not successful, then does that put some sort of, does that mean something about you or about the work you've done? I don't think you see it that way, but I think a lot of people would see it that way.
Yeah. So like in a
themselves.
lot of cultures, for example, I mean, the US is on one place in the risk curve, but like there's other places like in, I don't know, Japan or in Asia, right? Where if you're unsuccessful as an entrepreneur, it's actually stigmatizing to you. Well, the US is probably like more forgiving of failed
Especially the West
entrepreneurs.
Coast.
Yeah, especially the West Coast. But like I'm on one end where I don't really feel like it reflects on me at all if something doesn't work,
Why is that?
Well, to me, it's like shots on goal, like you only need one Twitch every 10 years to be in chips for the rest of it, So like for me, if I start a bunch of different businesses and some succeed and some don't work, as long as I'm like putting my best effort in and I think it's a good idea, like how do you know what's going to work beforehand?
Yeah.
You can't unless you're taking no risk.
All the things I've ever worked on, I've worked on it my full heart, like 100%. And yet so many of them haven't worked. And then a few of them did work. It's like, what's the difference? It's like, well, it wasn't how hard I worked. It wasn't my effort that I put in. So I sort of resonate with what you're saying of like, just, come up with an idea. Don't be worried about what happens to it. If you're passionate about it, be creative about it. And if it works, it works. And maybe it'll take 10 years for the next thing to work, but eventually something will hit.
Yeah, exactly. You have to take risk. If you want to be successful at anything, you have to do something that people haven't done before, and and that's implicitly a risk. That's true in anything, right? Like even in music or something, like if you're making music, if you just make music that people have made before, that is not going to differentiate you. You're never going to like build an audience and you're never going to get ahead of the pack,
Yeah. Yeah. I think Rick Rubin or somebody said like, you build things that you're excited about and that you like and love, and then maybe people will come with you. Maybe they won't.
Exactly.
But maybe they will.
Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Yeah. You never know.
How do you think about people and building the right kind of core group around you?
Well, I always just try to work with people where I'm inspired by something about them, where they fill a gap with me. I'm learning from them. They fill a gap in my own skills. And so it's always been whoever's been around. And sometimes that's worked really well. Sometimes it hasn't, to be honest. But like most of the time it's been really positive. And all of the time I've learned from people around me. And so, luckily I've been in some like really great social networks where I've had a lot of opportunities to work with really incredible, smart people. And it's been really, that's been the great joy of my life. Like people see me, but I'm not the one who like builds any of it. I'm an engineer by background in Twitch or Justin TV. I wrote some of the early code or whatever, but like at the end of the day, mostly it was built with the people around me and by the people around me. And I had a birthday party once where I assembled a bunch of like my favorite people in the world, and a lot of them I'd worked with, and they've been my collaborators and partners. And I said, like, you know, the people I've worked with, all of you have carried my dreams on your backs. And like, that has been the great joy of my life, is to work with people who are super talented and to build, like, breathe life into some amazing projects. And I could never have done it by myself.
Yeah. What would you do if you were Justin Kahn, just coming out of college, like, don't know anybody? Like, where would you start trying to build a sort of great group around you?
If you don't know anyone, you know, you don't have that social network, well, then you just got to go out and meet people. You know, when I started my first company, I started with a friend from college, right?
Yeah.
Actually, we were friends for much longer than that, but we went to college together. And so Emmett and I had grown up together, but we just, you know, we were friends during college. We kind of reconnected, actually. And then he was around. You know, it turns out he's super smart, but like at the time he didn't know any, you know, he wasn't like a great web engineer, you know, web application engineer at the time. We just figured it out together. And we're both pretty incompetent, to be honest, in lots of ways. And so we learned together. We were like evenly matched, and like we're just starting out.
Same age, same place of life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same age. Like
similar
things,
interests.
Yeah. The things that we had going for us were, number one, the ability to take risk.
Yeah.
Because we're young and we had like very low burn. We were probably paying ourselves like $800 a month. And then we picked a space to work on that was like a growth space, the tech industry.
Did you like do some full analysis on that, or did you just?
No, we just were like into it, right? So like in retrospect, it turned out that was a good idea.
Yeah. How did you end up, like, you talk about how you ended up selling Twitch? It was like you eventually Amazon bought it, but I think Google looked at it, Yahoo looked at it.
Yeah, I made a YouTube video of this, so you can get the kind of really in-depth story on YouTube. But like, it started off as us at the beginning of the year in 2014. Like early, I was like actually trying to sell some equity in the secondary market, like to get some liquidity. Like we didn't really have very much liquidity at the time. We'd spun off and sold like a small company called Social Cam, but we were like, hey, how do we make some money off of this? And we ended up trying to figure out how to like sell. You know, we're trying to sell secondary equity, but nobody wanted to buy it at a $200 million valuation. Then a couple months later, you know, we were trying to do this partnership with Google where they would link. You know, if a YouTuber was like also on Twitch, they would like link to them from their channel to their Twitch stream, and
just like a Twitch button on there.
Yeah, exactly. When they were live on Twitch, and then they were like, well, you know, why don't we just maybe we could work together more deeply? And then they wanted to buy us, and they kept offering us more and more money over time. Yeah, they were like bidding against themselves.
As in, they gave you an offer and you just said no,
we said
thanks.
No, and then they came back. Like the first offer was like 150 million or something.
Yeah,
plus $25 million in retention. And they were like, no, it's way too low. And then they just kept going up and up and up, and eventually it got to like 850 million plus 150 in retention. So like right around a bonus. Bill, right around $1 billion. Yeah. And then we actually said yes, but it turned out that they didn't think, well, they were like, there was a debate on what would happen with the antitrust. Like, and
if they own that whole market.
Yeah, so we said, hey, like you have to agree to a breakup fee. Like if the Department of Justice doesn't approve this deal, like if basically if there's a antitrust concern with this deal, then you end up paying us money. Right. And they were like, no. And they were also saying, well, we don't think there's antitrust risk. So we ended up walking off the deal. And then Yahoo came in briefly. They made us a big offer. We almost took it, or we did try to take it actually, and then they changed their mind at the last minute. And then finally Amazon showed up, and we ended up consummating the deal with them.
I mean, that's a lot of stress, pressure, no?
Yeah, it was pretty stressful. You know, you think one moment you're like, I'm going to make a ton of money, and the next moment you're like, oh no, they went away, you know? Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot for 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah. Really, my co-founder, Emmett, was kind of
dealing with the day-to-day.
Dealing and deciding what to do. So, because he was the CEO at the time. So it was probably the most stress on him, to his credit.
How do you navigate pressure?
Well, before I had mostly unhealthy ways of dealing with pressure.
Like what?
Like drinking. That was like number one. Number two was like, if I wasn't drinking, then I'd be like dissociating from my experience by watching hours and hours of TV. Which is also unhealthy, but maybe doesn't have the physical effects of drinking yourself to oblivion. So Ended up, that was like, luckily over time, probably after we sold Twitch, to be honest, I learned some more healthy mechanisms of coping with my experience. One big one, which helped me a lot actually, was I had this therapist who, so they told me about mindfulness, kind of like not in those terms, but I was telling her I felt guilty about how one of the companies wasn't going very well, and I was like kind of paralyzed by that guilt.
Yeah.
And she was like, "What does guilt feel like?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? It feels like guilt. That's that's a weird question." So she was like, "No, what does it feel like in your body?" And I'd never thought about how an emotion felt in the body before. So I was like, "Oh, it feels like kind of a tightness in my stomach, and like maybe like some energy in my chest, and like a voice in my head that says like, and like it was a combination of sensations." And then she was like, "Well, when you experience guilt, maybe next time, maybe just sit with it and just kind of focus on what it feels like." And I realized if I did that, then it would dissipate over time. The emotions, emotional content of the body wasn't persistent if you just kind of sit with it and sit with the experience. And so that was kind of the first healthy coping mechanism I think I ever developed. Beyond that, knowing like working out is really good for me. Like, so if I feel some type of way, like some difficult emotion, like often working out is a great reset, or just going on a walk, or gratitude journaling. So I have a lot of tools.
What do you do?
now.
What do you do for that?
Just every morning I write down the 3 things I'm grateful for.
You do that now every morning?
Yeah, every morning I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Then I usually write down the affirmations of like a couple affirmations every day. They're always the same.
Yeah.
So,
you don't have to share them if you don't
no,
want to. But
I can share them. So I say I love and am loved. One thing, I was always an outsider, so just realizing like and reinforcing, wow, I am loved by the people around me.
Is that in question?
Not anymore. I
Yeah.
think in the beginning it was.
Yeah.
And then I'm calm. I was thinking like I'm calm, whatever the outside world delivers to me, like I'm calm. I can weather it. And then lastly, I say like actually whatever happens to me, whatever happens today, I accept it.
You write it down.
I type it actually. On my phone. I just type the same thing every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this like you wake up and like before you shower everything? Is that like the first
usually in
thing
the
you do?
morning.
Yeah.
Now with kids, it's not necessarily
Yeah,
the first
it's
thing I do anymore,
Yeah.
but like I do.
But you always do it.
Yeah, every day.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it helps me a lot, just to know like, yeah, I am calm. I am loved. And like I am able to survive the circumstances, and many difficult circumstances. People look at like someone like me, I'm now have resources, I'm successful, whatever, and they're like, oh, that guy doesn't have any difficulties. But no matter who you are, the human brain is such that no matter who you are, you will experience things that are relatively difficult. Some days will be good, some days will be difficult. Like anyone who has kids know that like being rich doesn't solve like your kids being difficult or having
So in many ways it increases the difficulty, right? I mean,
I'm at the young age, so I probably haven't seen that yet. But like, so for me, it's like just reminding myself like I can weather whatever happens. I was a CEO of a company and successful, not successful, it didn't end up being successful. Like years after Twitch, I'm CEO of a company, and I flipped over the handlebars of my biking an e-bike around the city, and broke both my elbows. That was like a very not great thing to happen, and like very painful in the moment, and very painful physical therapy after, and surgery, and like, it'll never be 100%. But I survived it.
Yeah.
And I know like I can survive anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The anxiety feeling that you feel building a business, like, is that normal? Is it?
Yeah, I think it's normal.
Yeah.
I think it's normal. Everyone has anxiety. Anxiety is like a normal part of the human experience. One of the other things I always tell myself is like, when I'm experiencing a difficult emotion, maybe it's anger, anxiety, sadness, I always remind myself like, these are evolved traits to help me, right? Like anger is the sign that something's wrong and you should do something about it. Sadness is a sign that something was wrong in the past. Anxiety is a sign that maybe something will go wrong in the future. And your brain you have the rational brain that's like thinking thoughts, but you also have the emotional brain, and that's an intelligence that's taking in all the signals from the world and spitting out emotions. I almost think of it like AI, right? Like it's a black box how it's like coming up with these answers. but it's coming, it's spitting something out. And so like when anxiety appears in your consciousness, that's a signal to you, and it's actually there for your benefit, right? Humans didn't evolve anxiety just randomly. They evolved anxiety as a way to help them survive in the world, right? Because if you're anxious about something in the future, you might take some steps to prepare against that. And so when I remember, hey, like this is there to help me, and like, what can I learn from this anxiety? Maybe I do need to do something differently right now. Yeah. Then usually like it dissipates, right? Because you're sitting with it, analyzing it, accepting it, feeling it, and then letting it go.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't and including myself in the past, don't go through that whole process to let it go. Instead, they dissociate it from it, right? Which is like when I had that star engineer leave, I remember 10 years ago that happened to me. And instead of like processing it and letting it go, and what can I learn from this, I drank a fifth of Jameson and just passed out on my like living room floor, And so that's like, there's different mechanisms of dealing with your experience, your emotional experience, some of which are very deeply unhealthy, others are like healthy, but the emotional experience is there to serve you. So anxiety, it's like, it is a part of the human experience. And I think so much of like today's culture and, is about like, it's almost like saying it's not, like it's a problem, like having anxiety.
Burying it or
yeah,
like
it's like either dissociating from it or
from it.
Anxiety is like, I have like a mental health issue or, and yeah, maybe like there's some people who do have serious mental health issues, and it's good to acknowledge, hey, these are real experiences that people have. Not like it doesn't matter or doesn't make sense, but like the thing to do is to recognize that's part of the human experience and to process your emotions,
Yeah, I don't know if you've had this experience, but like where you wake up and just the world explodes on your business, and then by like 10 or 11 o'clock, you're just like, I got to get back in bed. Like I like, and it's like that physical, like my whole hard drive is shutting down, and I think what you're saying really resonates with me of just like, hey, like physically, like your body is trying to help you process these things and help you figure out how to deal with it, and trying to create a system where like if this is happening in my brain or this is happening to me in my heart, in my my body, like, hey, here are some ways that I can cope with that. Here's some ways that I can react to that can help me deal with it in a positive way versus some destructive way. Or
yeah, I think finding those positive things that work for you, like everyone's different, right? Finding the things that work for you, the strategies to cope with your experience that work for you was super healthy. You know? And I used to have days like that where I'd like be crippled by my experience and then go back to bed at 10 or 11 a.m. But I don't have them anymore, to be honest. And I still have things that are tough for me, relatively.
Because of how you figure out how to cope with it.
Exactly. I have strategies for me that I know work for me to be in the world and realize like I'm not the products I make. I'm not the companies I make. I'm not the money in my bank account. I'm not even reflective of my own health or the health of my family. I'm just going through this experience. Things happen, but like none of this stuff really reflects on me.
When the money hit from the Twitch acquisition, you said something like, you didn't even think that much money could be in a bank account. Like it was such a change in your life. Like, but did you wake up?
I had Bank of America at the time, and I was like, I didn't even know Bank of America could hold this much money. It's crazy, bro. Yeah.
But did you wake up the next day happier?
But that period of time was like a month.
Yeah.
It was really strong for a week. I was like, yeah, this is sick. And then after a month, I was kind of like, it was like my new baseline. The Hedonic Treadmill is real, which is
what is that?
It's like you adjust to your circumstances. That's why you have so many rich people are pissed off about their PJs or, bad service in a Michelin star restaurant or whatever, right? It's like, most people would look at them and be like, hey, they should never be mad. It's like if you're a billionaire or something, you should never be mad. But like I know a lot of billionaires, and that's not the experience.
Not realistic.
Yeah, because people adjust and adapt to their circumstances, good and bad. It's the whole thing about when you win the lottery, you're just as happy after 2 years as somebody who got paralyzed right after 2 years, right? Yeah, there's an adjustment period, but like people just have new baselines of happiness. And I've seen that happen both ways, right? Like for me, I made a lot of money, then I was just as happy as I ever was, which was medium happy before.
Yeah.
Now I think I'm pretty high happiness, but like before I was like medium, right? Then I broke my elbow and I could never do a bunch of things I love, like I used to work, bench press and do pull-ups and rock climb and stuff like that. I can't do that anymore. I got elbow surgery where like I have a replacement radial head. And I was devastated in the moment, but it had an extreme sense of loss, but now I'm just as happy as ever, actually happier, right? And so your external circumstances don't create lasting effects on your happiness. They create transitory effects.
I mean, this feels like something that's really evolved over time for you.
For sure. I used to be like a medium happy guy who was like I thought you couldn't change how happy you were. You were just like whatever your genetic destiny was how it would be. And I was just like, well, I'm kind of unhappy and kind of happy some of the time. And like, it is what it is.
Yeah. How do you balance the external, like this is what the world and, people around you like expect versus like you just finding peace and happiness for yourself? Like, I
don't care what the world expects.
Not at all.
No, I only care, I look to my own moral compass and my own values to decide like how I operate in the world. So for me, it's like, I do care about being a pro-social human being, right? Like I care about doing good for others. I care about mentoring people around me. I care about giving back in the ways that matter to me. I care about, contributing to society in my, I care about like the products I create not being negative for people, or like scams or whatever, and like that's all internally driven, right? It's not driven from an extrinsic values, right? It used to be, like I used to really care about what people thought about me and that they would, applaud me or that like my products were successful enough that I could be wealthy and people would like want to be me,
Yeah.
I don't really care about that anymore.
When did that change? Was there like a day or a moment that changed or?
Well, what happened was like we sold Twitch. I got everything I wanted and more that I ever thought I wanted, right? And then I found myself a month after we sold it thinking like, I'm just as unhappy as ever, which wasn't like deeply depressingly unhappy. It was just like medium. And so I tried to figure out what's going to make me happy. And I even started another company, raised a lot of money, tried to make that the thing. But I've realized over time, like I had been living out my life, to serve the needs of other people around me, that like I was trying to win their approval. I was making all these decisions in the world to get the approval of the outside world. And then I could be the source of my own approval in the world if I wanted to, and I could change how I was operating.
So you buy a G-Wagon and happiness meter doesn't
It just kind of went up for a little bit and then it went back down. Yeah, then it was back to baseline, yeah.
Yeah. And that happened with everything. Anything, like there's no...
Yeah, there's nothing that created lasting happiness that was driven from the outside world. Everything that's created lasting happiness for me has been about my own mindset, figuring out how I want to spend my own time, and also, who do I want to show up as in the world? It's ironic. Before I used to do things that were very I think there's one bell curve of people, axis of humanity that I think about a lot. On one end of the bell curve, it's people who put themselves in the center of the universe. And on the other end, it's people who put other people in the center of the universe. And being on either end of the bell curve is not that healthy, right? If you put yourself in the center of the universe, you're the narcissist. If you put other people in the center of the universe all the time, then you don't protect your own needs and you feel like you're stepped on and like disregarded, right? And I'm naturally much more on the self-centered side, and I realized that. And so I consciously, maybe 5 years ago or so, tried to start doing things that would bring myself more into this, to the center of the bell curve, and put other people more often in the center of the universe. And by doing that, I started doing a lot more things for the people around me. And
how did you do that? Like what were the specific things you would do?
I just try to show up in service of other people in different ways. So trying to mentor people around me. Like I coach some of my friends, for example, as their, as a CEO coach or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like, and it's not really like for an economic reason, some of them pay me like a marginal amount. Some of them don't pay, I don't.
Yeah,
I just do
you're
it
just
for free,
doing it
right?
because it's a good thing to do.
Exactly.
Help other people.
And, having kids is a great way to do that. It's like, when you have kids, it's entirely for their benefit, right? Hopefully. Otherwise, usually when it's for the parents' benefit, that's like pretty unhealthy, right? So, having those experiences in my life really brought me more towards the center of the universe. And now, I'm like, for the first time ever, I became like proud of who I was in the world. And it's pretty cool to feel like, oh wow, it's like I'm proud of me. Like I'm a good person. I'm a good friend to have. I'm a good father. I'm a good family member. I create some value in the world, and like I mostly go around pretty stoked to be me now. And it wasn't because I sold Twitch, you know.
I mean, that's super interesting because sitting on the outside and the way I think that the sort of materialistic world that we're in, we're sort of taught that like, hey, you know, it's almost like it's never enough. Like you got to get more, you got to get more, you got to get more, and then you're going to be happy, and then like things will get to a good place for you. And to hear your story about having done that and having still basically have a hole in your heart, you know, at the end of that still needs to get filled. It's not filled by any of these material things. Is sort of contrary to a lot of what we hear and see every single day. And you know, and it's, I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it's also true. Like some of the very best things, like they can't be bought. And that's sort of what's beautiful about the human experience is that anybody, anywhere, you know, can do the things that you're talking about. They can wake up every day and have a good, like, be positive. They can wake up every day and be grateful for the things they have and not the things that they don't have, you know?
Yeah.
And it's, but it's really hard. It's really hard to get to that. It's really hard to get to that place. And I think most people would think, oh, if like once as soon as I sell my company, like I'm going to get there.
You know, and the truth is for almost everybody alive today, you are exceedingly better off than almost everybody who was alive in history, right? Like today, most people are not worried about food security and their physical security and like having the lights come on when they hit the light switch. And yeah, I mean, I acknowledge that there are people who are worried about that in the world, but you know, through most of human history, people were very, very concerned with those things. And like, so you are in an exceedingly good position and have something a lot to be grateful for, no matter who you are in the world right now. But you're not. And why aren't you? It's, you know, I think part of it is, you know, you're marketed that you shouldn't be by social media and, you know, the media in general around you is saying, oh, you should have more, you should want more, you should, you know, like even like being in this interview with me, you're like, oh, that guy's cool spaceship behind him. You know, well, if I had a spaceship, I'd finally be happy. Exactly. So, you know, it's hard in the world of, in the modern world to break out of that mindset.
Yeah. You meditate a lot? Talk to us about like, why do you meditate? Do you also pray? Do you just meditate?
I think my micro meditations are more like what's resonating for me right now. Kind of like what I was saying, where it's like, really feeling my experience in certain moments, particularly around like emotional content. I do pray actually.
Yeah. You find that helps?
Yeah, it helps. Like I do have like a belief in a kind of universal power. I don't know them. I don't think that's like particularly any specific religion affiliation, but like, and you know, I do think that there's like a universal power that I'll return to, it has like, and I've been blessed, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
I heard this astronaut speak one time and they said, you know, from space, there's no borders. You just see, I can't remember what the effect is called, but there's this effect where like when you look down on the earth, you just sort of, you sort of realize like, wow, I'm such, you know, everything to me is really important and it's the most, you know, critical thing right now, but actually like I'm part of something much larger and much bigger and much, basically all of it is out of my control and, you know, being grateful to be part of it and you know, and having the experience and, you know, and I think just recognizing the gratitude of that is really, it's been really powerful for me.
I think having you know, I've done 5-MeO-DMT, which I think is, you know, Joe Rogan and Mike Tyson have talked about, like a lot of people have talked about now. And it's like, for me, it was that experience of like falling back into the sea of consciousness and realizing you're just such a small piece of the experience of the universe of experience.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think we're about the same age. We're almost exactly the same age. I think we're still relatively young. We're not young. I don't know. We say young?
I think of myself as young.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the cutoff for being young?
Young is a state of mind.
Okay, so you'd be 80 years old, be young.
Well, I think there's like a lot of things I try to do to make myself stay young.
Yeah.
You know, I like really try to push myself out of my comfort zone a lot. Like I think a lot of people who are our age and older or even younger than us physically, like once you come into power in some way, whatever that is, your relative power, you stop making yourself uncomfortable. You create a bubble around yourself. I try to break that down all the time by like doing things I've never done before. Like I try to do things that are uncomfortable. You know, I fast 5 days every year.
Straight?
You know, straight 5 days.
Water fast?
Five
or?
days. I drink coffee,
Yeah.
because otherwise it's like really too bad. But like, water fast basically with coffee for 5 days.
What does that do?
Well, it's deeply uncomfortable, you know, but it's a spiritual reminder for me. It's like, when you don't have food, everything that you thought was a problem, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Not having food is the problem. And just a reminder that like everything you're concerned with is like not as bad as you thought. But anyways, that's just an example. My point is like, there's a lot of other things that I think are pretty uncomfortable. I try to like stay doing. I think that's a way to stay young. I also constantly am like actually trying to hang out with people who are like younger than me, you know, and like get that like young energy. You know?
Yeah.
And like
people right out of college or people?
I don't know. Like people are. It's like it makes them different. You know, in our Burning Man camp, for example, there's a lot of people in their 20s, and I'm like, okay, what are people doing now? Like, how have I aged out? And like, I don't understand what's going on anymore.
Right. Do you feel like your ideas now are as good as they were when you were in college or right out of college? Do you feel like
I think
the things you come up with, the way that you come up with has changed?
It's a little different. I mean, I think they're better businesses because I have a better idea of like what a business is, and like what business models exist. I think they're less out there, less risky in some ways because I'm like not in it like that like cutting edge sometimes. For example, like there's all these AIs, you know, bots on Twitter that are like, you know, they're like agents,
wreaking
havoc, and I'm not like, that's like something that I would have been at the forefront of like 20 years ago with Justin TV. Right now I'm like, what is going on here? You know, like I'm trying to like study it, you know, and so I think that's an example of like, I don't know, maybe is that a thing? I don't know. Maybe it'll turn into a thing or something, right? But like, I'm not like at that cutting edge.
You're at the cutting edge of AI spam bots.
Exactly. So, you know, I don't know.
Where do you go to just like starting a business, or do you even think about it like that?
It's like people first. Usually it doesn't start with a specific idea. It's like, I want to work in a space, like let's say a crypto or you know, this non-alc wine or something like that. And then I'm like trying to find partners. Like I like to work with other people. So it's like, I always want to start a business with partners. And then it's like, okay, who are the right people where they're really good at the things that I'm not good at, and I'm good at the things they're not good at. And then if I find someone, then we kind of work together for a bit and like see if it's a good vibe. I have a business partner, Robin. We partner on almost all the businesses. So like he and I work together really well. So like we'll like work with people and see if it's a good vibe from our fund, Go Capital, and then you know, we'll trial it, and then if it's a good vibe, we'll start the company and fund it.
I mean, what would you say your level of like leaning in and excitement with like funding a business versus like running your own, or, you know, building a project or something? Like, how would you rank?
Well, I like
things?
I like to be involved, you know. So for me, it's like fun to like be part of the experience of building the company. I don't want to run it. I'm not CEO of any of these companies. I think I put in my time as CEO and realized I wasn't that good. And so, you know, rather partner with someone to be the CEO. But like I also love, you know, I invest in a lot of businesses. I love investing in businesses. It's not quite the same itch for me as like starting a company, but it's really meaningful to mentor people. You know, one of the things I'm most proud of in the world, more than Twitch actually, or more than any one business, is there's probably, you know, 50 to 100 guys and girls in Silicon Valley who are like, thank God for Justin. You know, like he helped me in some way. I was like the first investor in their company. I was their mentor. I was their boss, and they went on to start something. And, you know, it means a lot to me to know I really gave back in some way. Yeah.
It's probably like 5 or 6 years ago. I remember talking to you, and I was kind of like, I think, inside of this wheel that we've been speaking about, and like the sort of expectations and all these sort of outside voices coming in. Yeah. And I remember saying something to you like, you know, like, well, I don't have this, or I don't have that. You know, like I haven't accomplished enough to get this or get that. One of the things you said to me was, well, and I was kind of like, well, you like, you're at this place that I'm not, like, it's like, you should basically have peace. Like you sold your company for $1 billion and
Yeah.
I haven't. And then I think your response to me was like, well, if I base my self-worth on that, like, how do I feel about like my friend who started Airbnb or who started this company that's worth 100x that? Like, are they 100x better person than me? And should they be 100x happier than me? Like, I don't know, like I've thought about that a lot, and it actually really helped me a lot because, yeah, if you just like, if it's never enough, if like what you are and what you have is never enough, then it kind of just goes on for infinity. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. There's always someone who's doing better than you. You know, I said, there's like, you might be looking at me and be like, wow, that guy really made it. I'm looking at, my friend who started whatever, Airbnb or Dropbox or Coinbase, these guys really made it. They're looking at Zuck and they're like, wow, that guy's like worth 300 bill or whatever. He's like, he really made it. And Zuck is probably looking
At Elon.
Elon, sure, or Steve Jobs, and to be like, wow, that guy really made it. And Steve Jobs is dead. So, there's like, no matter who you are, there's someone else there that's above you.
Yeah. Outside of family, like, who's the human being that you most admire or you look to or are inspired by?
I have a friend, this guy Bill Atkinson. He's one of the early employees at Apple. He's the inventor of the Mac, and he did a bunch of the early UX on it. He's the reason why, for example, the text used to be like white on black, and then they inverted it to black on white as the default. I think he like created that.
Huh.
He invented HyperCard, which is kind of the precursor to the internet. And he's like one of the most peaceful and joyous people in his everyday moments that I've ever encountered. When you're in his presence, you're like, this guy's like figured it out. Feels like a bodhisattva who's come back to earth to like spread love, and I think just having that presence and in the world is like, wow, that's what I would want to get to one day.
What's the hardest thing you think you've ever dealt with in your life?
I went through a period of suicidal ideation.
Really?
Yeah, where I was like not happy with how I showed up in the world. I was showing up in the world and I was like, this is not, it's kind of involuntary. It was like, this is not working, and that was quite difficult for me. And, when I went through and changed things about my life to show up in a way that I was proud of, then that really changed it for me.
This is like post some success or pre-success?
Yeah, this is after I sold Twitch.
Yeah.
So, once again, like the external circumstances and your internal feelings are like not completely disconnected, but they're not 100% correlated.
Yeah. How did you get out of that hole?
Yeah, I think it was relying on myself in that, how do I actually do find a lot of catharsis from talking things through with other people, and I'm pretty open about my experience. So, that part probably did help, but like at the end of the day, it was more about myself and how do I show up in a way that I'm proud of? How do I, work on things that are important and meaningful to me? How do I make myself happy every day through these like basic practices?
Yeah. You think those little things like that can lead to having big change?
Absolutely. I think that's the small things that create the big things. Like I think about happiness as like you're trying to fill up a bucket, one drop at a time. And every day you just put in drops, and then eventually you got a full bucket. It's not a light switch, right? It's not like, I used to think of it as a light switch. Oh, if I just sell Twitch, then boom, I'll be happy. Turn on the lights, but they just go back off, right? Like it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. You want to be really happy. You also, like, you don't want to be really sad. And it's like, you got to kind of move in the sphere of both of those things once in a while. That's part of being human. It's part of the experience we're in.
Exactly. You're going to have sadness. No matter who you are, you're going to have sadness.
Yeah.
You're going to get old. You might be super rich and like never have daily trauma, but like the richest, a lot of friends who are super successful, right? Like, and I've seen people, they go through normal human, like their family members get sick or things happen, right? And you are going to experience sadness. And it's not about dissociating from that or shoving it down. It's about accepting your experience, whatever it is. You're going to have sadness, you're going to have happiness. Consciousness is going to experience a whole range of things. And the best thing to do is accept it.
What accomplishment are you most proud of?
Being a good father. I think I'm proud of how I show up as a father. I think I'm an active parent, and I think my kids will. I said, people ask me. They used to ask me, like, when my first kid was born, my first son was. They said, what do you want for your kid? And I remember 10 or 20 years ago when I thought about having kids, I was like, I want them to be successful, driven, whatever. And today the answer is I want my kids. It's very simple. It's like I want them to be kind to themselves and others. And I want them to be the source of their own approval in the world. And I think, that was 5 years ago, and now my oldest kid is 5, and I feel like he's on the way. I don't know what's going to happen, but he's on the way to that. And I do think that, like, my wife and I had an active role in creating that for him. And that's what I'm most proud of.
People often ask, like, do you want your kids to be entrepreneurs? And
I think they'll make their own choice.
I'm like, do you want your kids to go to war? Like, no, I mean, if you want to go do something really hard, if you're driven by it, go do it. But it's not, certainly not pushing anybody to go start a business or,
Yeah, they should find their own path.
If when you die, you meet God or some universal creator face to face, what would you hope they say to you?
Well, I don't think it'll be a conversation like that. I think it's more like returning to the source energy.
Yeah.
So it's more just, I'm going to be like a drop of conscious energy that falls back into the ocean of consciousness. And, so I think it'll be like a simultaneous return to all of the knowledge and experiences of the universe. So I don't know if they'll say something specific, but if they did say something to me, I'd probably want them to say something like, I love you.
How will you ultimately measure your life?
I think I used to be in, like, how many experiences I had or how much I did.
Yeah.
And now I think it's much more like, who did I show up as? Do I feel like I was there for other people? Both, like, people I'm close to and people I'm not as close to. One friend of mine said, maybe 2 years ago, she told me, Justin, you would do anything for anyone. Like, and that really meant a lot to me, to think my friends thought so highly of me, like that I, would be of service, yeah, that's I think what's really meaningful to me now. Yeah. That's why I make these YouTube videos and stuff, I'm making videos on whatever, entrepreneurship or life or whatever.
They're awesome.
People like them, but they they're not that big. It's like, each one gets
hundreds of thousands of views.
No, the big one's got hundreds of thousands, but there's some of them that get like 1,000 views or a couple thousand views or whatever, right? But I get I get feedback from people that are like, wow, that, like, helped me in some way. Someone was like, I remember someone I kind of knew socially, but not really, was like, oh, I read your thing on, like, how to sell my company, and I used that to sell my company. Someone else is like, I had one entrepreneur who was like, I was going to quit my startup, but then I, like, read a bunch of stuff that you were doing to make yourself feel good in the world. And then I started doing those things, and then, like, repaired my relationship with my co-founder. I was just like, it's like happy now, and that was someone I'd never met. So just knowing I've done good in the world for the people around me that I'm on this planet with, that's, like, most meaningful to me.
It's had a big impact on me. I mean, you put a lot of this stuff out many years ago, and I've watched all of it. And I think it's, the natural condition that we're in. Like, there's so many things that I feel like sort of like outside influences trying to tell you where you should be and where you should go. And I think the thing that I learned most from you is just, like, actually, like, what you need is right here, and you just need to be more thoughtful and sort of, I don't know, more empathetic to yourself, and just sort of trust that what's going to happen is what's supposed to happen. And I don't know, I like it. It's had a big impact on me. All right, and finally, like what part of your success do you attribute to your hair?
100%. This is my proudest accomplishment. Actually, you asked me what my proudest accomplishment was. Well, usually when people ask that, I'd say it's my hair. Because, for the longest time I had it short, and I was afraid to grow it long because I thought it would look stupid.
It doesn't look stupid.
No, it's awesome. So,
Does it stop growing or does it just keep going?
I cut it. I need a haircut actually, because what I learned, guys don't know anything about long hair.
Please teach
But
me.
when you grow your hair long, actually how you cut it, it turns out it falls differently. I discovered my wife, made me get a haircut a couple of years in, and I was like, oh, this is actually good. And then another thing is guys' hair care. People never learn about that. You have to condition it. You don't want to wash it all the time. This is complicated. I actually think there could be a startup that focuses on long-haired guys, because when they, most people form their health care, their bodily care habits young, right?
Yeah.
I use Old Spice deodorant or whatever, and
Sure.
I've been doing that for 20 something years.
They got us
right?
in the
25
90s.
years, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but hair, if you grow your hair long, that would be your first time that you actually have long hair, and so that's an opportunity to get in with a whole new set of products.
Yeah.
So I give that one for free to the audience.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to co-found it with me, I think I
don't think you're the right
I could
founder.
be.
You want people who are more
Living
the
the
users
problem.
of the product. Exactly, users of the product. But
Thanks,
yeah,
Appreciate you. Thank you.
absolutely.
Divot.
On next week's episode.
I came to America in 1992 with no plan. I didn't know why I came. I just went. I heard it's land of opportunity. That's the only thing I knew. So I came here, didn't speak any English, and I had only $700 cash. So that's the beginning of my journey in America.